Hey everybody, Michael Goodman here. We're going to give it another minute before everyone joins. Give people a second to join. So let's just hang tight for one more minute. All right. We'll give it one more minute and then we'll get started. Just give people a second to do their clicks. I'm Michael Goodman. I'm the marketing director here at Luna Technologies. It's a pleasure to have you guys join us today. And hang tight. We'll get started in just a second. All right, let's get started. My name is Michael Goodman. I am the marketing director here at Luna Technologies. Welcome and glad to have you join us for our webinar on scaling your extraction business. I'm pleased to be joined by Josh Lippold, owner and operator of Emerald Valley Processors in Eugene, Oregon, and Jack Nato, president of Luna Technologies. We joined Josh down at his place of business in Eugene, Oregon, just before MJ BizCon, and he spoke to us about like some of the tips and tricks that he's learned through his time and years in the extraction and cannabis business. So we're going to roll that segment that we recorded down there with him, but Josh and Jack are here live with us, and we'll be answering those questions. We also have time at the very end to answer questions. So anything that we can't answer on the chat, we will answer live. And so without further ado, we'll get started here.
Hey everyone, I'm Jack Nato. I'm the president of Luna Technologies, and today I'm at Emerald Valley Processors with Josh Lippold, and we're talking about how to scale your business, especially in a competitive marketplace. Just right off the bat, I want to say that we really like working with Josh down here at Emerald Valley. Josh has put together a really good team. I think they have a really good balance of cannabis knowledge, deep cannabis knowledge, and also deep scientific knowledge. Josh has done a really awesome job of merging those two worlds, which is very important. So yeah, with that being said, Josh, could you give us a little bit about your background?
Yeah.
And yeah, just how you got into the business?
So I got into the business. I've kind of always been somewhat connected to the cannabis industry through the medical industry. Had a medical grow at my house a long time ago, but never did processing. Then about 4 or 5 years ago, this facility started from the ground up, and it was a hemp facility. We were doing CBD extraction and THC remediation by chromatography. And then COVID hit. That kind of crashed the whole CBD market. It crashed all of our potential clients at that point in time. So the hemp business went out of business. They filed bankruptcy, and then this facility was then bought by partners of mine, and we took the facility that was already large scale for CB and decided to go to the rec market, spend the money on automation with the Luna. We started with the IO, which is a smaller version of this extraction skid. And with the plan of that was we wanted to be able to remove as much labor cost as we could from our costs of goods sold and try to scale back on any of the high costs, which is usually labor. So automation was pretty much the best answer for that. Luna has a phenomenal automated system, and it gives us the ability to run all day long, but only spend maybe an hour a day actually processing in this room or running the HMI to turn the system on and off.
Josh, could you talk about a little bit what the transition was like from going from larger scale CBD down to smaller scale THC?
Yeah, so large scale CBD, you were just kind of going after one molecule, ideally the CBD molecule. You're trying to remove THC. You're not really trying to preserve your terpenes or any of the volatile compounds that give the flavor to the plant or your extracts. So it's definitely a different model. We did room temperature hexane extraction, pretty large scale, and we chose hexane because it was a very fast recoverable solvent, and then we would then switch to methanol for chromatography for our THC remediation. And in that, we don't need to preserve any of the terpenes. We don't need to preserve any of the flavors. We could just strip everything we could out of the plant, try to get CBD and extract it as fast as we could, and then isolate the CBD by crystallization. Or if we were trying to keep all the minors, the CBN or the CBG, we would use chromatography, remove just the THC, and then take that CBD, distill it, and then we would have a high CBD content with no THC or very, very low THC. The biggest difference between that and this is when you're doing a smokable extract that you want to actually enjoy the flavor of, you need to use a butane gas, propane gas, and you need to extract at extremely cold temperatures to preserve all of those terpenes, because they want to boil off and go away as quick as they can. And if you use butane or propane, you're going to preserve all of those terpenes a lot better.
Did you run into any issues when you went from CBD back to THC?
I would say the biggest issue we had was just trying to plan what our end product was going to be, trying to plan how we can scale this process as fast as possible, and what kind of routes we could take that would save us labor and time. There's a lot of labor in the hemp side when you're doing chromatography, THC remediation, where on this side, we can get a usable product out of this machine in like 2 days. And that's not 2 days of process time. That is just 2 days of our THCA precipitation growth and crashing out the sugars out of the solution. Where CBD, you have to extract, you have to winterize, you have to then remediate by chromatography, then you have to decarboxylate it, then you have to then distill it, and then you're at a finished product. Where with the Luna, you take your material, you pack it into a bag, you load it into the machine, you press start on the HMI, and then an hour and a half later, you're going to be pouring out of the machine here into a pan. You put it in your oven, you grow and crash out the THCA, and you're at a usable product once you put it in the vacuum oven and remove the residual solvent out, where that's pretty much 2 steps versus 5 or 6 you would have prior to that in the CBD world.
Yeah.
So it's a massive amount of time savings and process cutting out.
Yeah. Since we're talking about terpenes, terpene preservation, and THC, can you talk a little bit about, or a little more about, how you select biomass, where it comes from, what's important to, and maybe what some of the differences are between a biomass you process for CBD versus for THC?
Yeah, so with CBD, pretty much the only thing that mattered was it had 10% or more CBD, and that would make it viable to extract and spend all of that time getting 10% of that product out of the biomass. Where here, we can take trim that's 15 to 25% THC, or buds that are up to 35% THC, and we can extract those, and we're getting a lot more product out of that same amount of material, sometimes 2 to 3 times as much. CBD did not matter about the terpenes. Nobody was really caring about terpenes. Most people wanted the CBD isolate, or they wanted a distillate that had no flavor left, and it was just good for formulating into other products, and they didn't want the taste of cannabis or the taste of hemp. Where when you're running high quality THC biomass, everybody wants it to taste like the flower smells. They want the flavor profile to be the exact same as it was as a plant, as it is in an extract. And you can't do that unless you're extracting really cold with gas. So when we're trying to find a good product or a good biomass to run for THC, and on this side with the Luna, we're going to do a test extraction. We're going to do a little benchtop extraction. We're going to see what it yields. We're going to also test the biomass prior to see how much THC is in there. And then when we extract it, we're going to test our spent biomass and see how much THC we left in the plant or in the biomass. And we will then know what our extraction efficiency is if we soaked long enough or if we ran the right process, and we can adjust that on the fly. and do a little bit longer soak or do a different process at a different temperature and get more of those volatile terpenes out or get more of the THC out. So quality is definitely far more important on THC side, on the recreational cannabis side, because we want the best quality extract or the best quality biomass to make our best quality extract. You can't make a good product out of bad biomass. You can make a really good product out of good biomass, but you can also destroy a really good biomass if you're not running a good process. If we were going to run a high quality biomass in the same process we did on CBD, by the time it was done, it wouldn't even be a sellable dab that people would want to do, because all the smells would be gone, all the flavor would be gone. You'd be left with a subpar product that required more processing time.
Yeah. It's all, I mean, everyone always says garbage in, garbage out, right?
Yep, fire in, fire out, garbage in, garbage out. And
so when
definitely true.
I know you do have your own grow. How much do you source from other farms? How much comes from yours, and how did you make that decision?
So we're vertically integrated. We have a store, we have 2 farms, we have a wholesale license that's located here as well. So we use the wholesale to sell everything. We use the processing license to process everything. Before we had a processing license, they would have a grow and they would be stuck with material or trim that they either had to sell to a processor to then process, and then they would charge them money to then process it, and they'd get the extract back, or they'd sell it for them. And that wasn't really profitable. It wasn't a very good business model. But it's really all the choice growers have at this point is they take their product that they can't sell as a flower or a smokable flower, and or their trim they can't turn into pre-rolls. They have a big waste stream that they have to do something with. And the only thing they do with that, if you don't have a processing license, is sell it to a processor. So now that we have a processing license and a grow, we can take all of that flower that we weren't going to sell or that has sat too long and wasn't selling quick enough. We can then process it, turn it into a great product that's sellable, and get that waste stream to be a profitable stream.
So I also think that there's a hierarchy or a big spectrum of quality in biomass, right?
Yeah.
Some is better for other methods of extraction, like you're mentioning. Some is better to sell as flower. And I know you used to process with hexane or heptane?
Hexane. On CBD side, yeah.
So, and ethanol is in the same realm, I think.
Yeah.
So what's the difference? What made the determination to stop processing with heptane or stop processing with hexane?
Hexane, yep.
And move to processing some of the lower quality biomass with BHO?
A lot of the times you take your trim that's been sitting for 6 months, it's going to oxidize a little bit, it's going to age, and it's going to get darker. And if you ran that through the Luna and you extracted it, it could still be a decent product, but it's going to be really dark. It's going to have a lot of plant material smells left in it. It's almost like a grassy hay smell, where you can use BHO and you can extract with it. You can use a CRC column and you can put media in there, and you can use this to filter out all of the impurities in the plant that you don't want anymore. You can take a 6-month-old trim that is not sellable, wouldn't really be a good extract as it sits, but you can extract it. You can then run it through a CRC column using very selective medias that are going to pull out those impurities, and it's going to make you a higher purity product and a better color. It's going to preserve the terpenes that are still left in there, and it's going to remove all those funky smells you don't want. It's going to remove the chlorophyll. It's going to remove the fats and the waxes and the things that will give you that weird, funky, dark color or the weird smell. And you can make it into a really good sellable product. And there's kind of like a hate towards CRC in the industry. I think it's really a lack of understanding what CRC is. Every industry uses CRC. If every cooking oil you use uses a style of CRC, they use a media, they're using clays and dirts to filter out the impurities in that product. We do the same thing here. We're using CRC media, and we don't do it on everything. If we have a really good product, we don't use CRC. We can do it without the CRC. But we're going to filter down to 0.2 micron, which is smaller than any spores or any bacteria that will make it past it. There is no chance of that clay or dust getting past it into your extract, which would be the only downfall to CRC. Or if you're over CRCing, you can remove too many terpenes. You can kind of get the flavor profile removed. But on an older material, that's not really going to be an issue. It's going to be on the newer material that has a really good flavor profile that you want to preserve. So you just use a tiny bit of CRC or no CRC if it is a good enough material. But say it's a 3-month-old bud run or nug run that you're going to do that was like a B bud, wasn't really sellable, wasn't hitting the market and people weren't buying it, or the shelf appeal wasn't that great. You can run that, do a little bit of CRC on it, just kind of polish up the extract, and it'll come out looking really light yellow, beautiful color, no dark, weird, funky, grassy hay smell, and it'll be a product that people would consider a top shelf or a really high-end looking product. And it wouldn't have been if you didn't CRC it or filter it. And honestly, if you take a product that has been CRC'd and has not been CRC'd and try it, and we've done this multiple times with clients that toll process for, we'll make cartridges out of a non-CRC product. We will then take that same CRC product or same product and CRC it. Every single time they will pick the CRC product. It looks better, it smells better, and it tastes better. And that is because you're removing impurities and things you don't want to inhale, things you don't want to smoke. So I'm a strong believer in CRC, that it is the right choice, that it is going to give you a better product. And as long as you're doing it right and you're taking the precautions to not let any media get past your filters, and you're not doing anything that would allow that media to get into your extract, you're going to have a phenomenal product that really is going to be hard to beat.
And it seems like what you're saying is that, especially when you're trying to process at a higher scale, when you don't have access to, I mean, you can't be processing 700 pounds a day of A buds or whatever it is, then that's where CRC becomes even more important in the process. It allows you to grow and process a bigger, broader range of biomass.
And we have multiple levels or multiple tiers of brands that we produce product on. We're not going to take an old trim and we're not going to say it's the best thing ever just because it's light. We are going to get a COA on it. We're going to test how many terpenes are in it. We're going to say this is meeting at a level that's above the lower tiered cost. It's going to go to a higher tiered brand that deserves to have that high potency, high terpene content, and it fits the bill to match that. If we're running trim that is still really good, it comes out great, but the terpene levels is like 7-8%, and it's really not amazingly phenomenal, or it's not like top tier level fresh frozen extract, we're going to sell it at our lower brand, and we're going to sell it at a very fair price to the consumers, so they can get an affordable, good tasting, clean medicine that they enjoy and that they can afford to buy. We would love to run the best product all day, every day, but that's unrealistic. People are going to sell their flower that is their A-buds, that is going to be making the best product almost every time over running it to a processor. Our farm is always going to sell their flower first, and then if they can't sell that flower or the C-buds aren't going to sell, they're going to come to us and we're going to process that and turn that stream into something that is more profitable. But it's going to be hard to make a top tier indoor flower as profitable at an extract level as it is at a flower level. So you always want to be smart about your business. You kind of make sure that you're selling the flower first, then you process the stuff that's second grade down below that. And it may not even be that the product is any bit less. It's just the nuggets aren't as big, or the buds don't look as good or as dense. So
might be shelf appeal.
Exactly, shelf appeal. 100% just visual experience, and you take that to an extract and it's going to turn into that top tier product from a mid tier flower, which we'll still make a top tier flower or extract.
Yeah, since we're standing here, since we've been talking a little bit about the process in more detail, can you tell us about the room we're in? Yeah,
so we're in a C1D1 room. Everything is shut off right now. That's why we have cameras in here. Everything's locked out. It's safe, so don't worry about that. We are lucky where we had this facility built out. It was already designed to run hexane. There was very little bit of changes we had to do to make it a C1D1 room, where most people are in a small booth, a 10 by 10 booth or a 10 by 20 booth, and you're very cramped. You don't have that much space. This facility was originally built from the ground up with the intentions of being an extraction facility. So we have all of our gas sensors, we have all of our safety lights, we have all of our alarms, and we have everything in place in a stick-built room that has all the firewalls built in. There's a 6-hour firewall on that wall because it shares a wall with another building, 3-hour firewalls on all the other walls, where if you do have a fire, if there is an issue, the fire will not leave the room. It'll stay safe in here. We have fire sprinklers, which allows us to have more butane and propane in here. We have the 3-hour firewalls, which ups your limit of how much solvent you can have. So the benefit is we have a giant room that we can fit a huge extractor in. We used to have the IO right there, and we had them both installed it at the same time for a while. And that'd be really hard to do in a traditional 10 by 10 extraction booth or a 10 by 20 extraction booth, where you're going to be very tight spaced, and the ceilings probably aren't very tall. We have 13-foot ceilings in here. The larger space also just gives you more room to do post-processing in here.
I think that's something that a lot of people don't really think about. A lot of people come to us, a lot of customers, and they say, how small a space can we put our extractor in? And we say, well, okay, technically it'll fit in this amount of area. It's very small. It'll fit in a really tight space. But like you're saying, there's many reasons why you want to just expand that a little bit.
Yeah.
Like if you're thinking about growing later, you guys came in originally thinking you're going to upgrade extractors and process more, or just the amount of value that comes out of this 10 by 10 space, or we're probably in a 10 by 20 space.
It's a 20 by 14, I think.
In 20 by 14, in this many square feet, you could have a few extractors. And the amount of value that you get out of this square footage, it just doesn't really compare to any other room in your building.
Absolutely.
And so people really try to push it, where we try to steer them. Hey, maybe try to squeeze 10 square feet out of another room, but let's get some space for the extraction room itself.
Absolutely.
So a good point to bring it up.
Yeah, I think I've gone to plenty of different labs. They usually have a 10 by 10 booth. That's, I'd say, the most common size. You go in there and you walk in the door and you're at the extractor. Like, you don't have that much room. You can't have a lab table. We have multiple lab tables in here. We have carts in here that we can fit 20 pans on, where in a 10 by 10 booth, you're not going to be able to fit that cart and yourself and a lab table. So where do you work out of? What do you do when you're trying to disassemble the machine and do maintenance? You're just stuck in a tiny little room, where here you also have the sound deadening of a big room, where if you have a 10 by 10 booth, when your MVP pump is running, it's going to be clanking and making loud noises, and it's going to really echo through that room. You're going to have to wear ear protection. And here the air or the sound disperses a lot better. It's a little more spread out, and it's not as over consuming versus a small 10 by 10 booth. And if there's an emergency or a situation where you need to get out of the room really quickly, 10 by 10 booth, you might be next to the extractor by the wall and not have a direct path to get out.
Yeah.
And that's really concerning. And I think a lot of people want to try to save as much money as they can on their booths, because it's a pretty big cost. But if you can upgrade that booth to a bit bigger size, I'd always recommend it. You want some space, you want some elbow room, you want to have two people in there at once. You need to be able to do that and not feel like you're cramped. If you need to get out, you want to be able to get out quick.
Yeah, like what you were saying with how you sprinkler this room to have a higher gas quantity.
Yep.
That's really important to think about when you're starting your business, because like for you guys, you could have run our smaller extractor, the IO extractor, on the amount of gas you get with no sprinklers.
Correct, yep.
But you had the foresight to think, hey, we're going to upgrade. Let's put the sprinklers in now so we can have the higher gas quantity, and it's not going to hinder us later.
Absolutely.
We don't have to go back and redo work, go back for permitting, things like that.
Yeah, I believe it's 120 pounds is what you're allowed if you don't have fire sprinklers. And then if you have a 3-hour firewall, you can double that. And if you have fire sprinklers, you can double it again. So it goes from 120, 240 to 480 pounds of gas. So we're allowed to have 480 pounds of gas. It would be hard to run the Oberon with, I mean, you could do it with the 240, but you would be at your limit. And you would have to kind of plan your gas. We can have a couple cylinders of gas in here ready to put in this system, and we're still compliant and safe and not taking any risks or breaking any laws by doing that.
Okay, so Josh, we're in Oregon here, and we know that we have some of the lowest prices in the country for cannabis products. We know it's a really competitive market.
Yes.
So coming in maybe 4 years after rec legalization, sounds challenging. So how do you go about that? What was your strategy?
Yeah, so it was definitely coming in, we're like, we know the prices have already pretty much gone towards the bottom. I wouldn't say they've completely bottomed out yet, but they're very low. The cost to buy a smokable extract at the dispensary is anywhere from $5 to $25 for mid to good tier, I would say, and then upper tier is probably $40 to $60. When we came in, we knew that we had to be able to meet that mark. We Me and my partners are very business oriented, where we are professional. We want to know every decision before we make it. And I'm really big on calculators, Excel, and getting your cost of goods sold figured out long before you make any purchase. So with that business plan, we wanted to see where we could cut as much cost. That's automation, again, is number one key there. But also finding material that you can feed the Luna and keep it fed and keep it producing all day, every day is a big undertaking. One of our partners has been in the grow side of this in Oregon since the medical market, since recreational started, and he's still been growing ever since. He hasn't stopped. He's never taken a season off. So with that, he has a lot of relationships with a lot of different growers, a lot of different people in the industry, and he's really smart about preserving his businesses and making it past some of the big ups and downs that this industry has had. So with that being said, we could figure out where do we need to be at the market, where can we be competitive, and how can we produce all of this. So we took the estimated throughput of the Luna and we put it into a calculator, and we figured out this is what we can process per day. This is what the current market is for trim. Say it's X amount of dollars. How much does it cost to make that product into an extract? How much electricity does it cost? What is the rent cost? What is the lease cost? What is the monthly payment we're paying on a Luna? Or what is every bit of moving target cost evaluation was put into this calculator, and as a calculator I use every single day. Every time we get product in, I put it into my calculator. I see this is the estimated yield of what we should get. I always go on the lower end. And I say, this is the labor cost, this is the equipment cost, this is the gas cost. And then at the end, when we figure out the cost it makes to package that single gram of extract, we know that we're going to be profitable and we're not going to be losing money. And in that, we've been able to come into the market and sort of undercut everybody. But in our opinion, we're just giving people a better value. We're not this big MSO company. We're all Oregon, local Eugene money. It's all family and friends that we've known each other for a long time, many years. And the goal here is just to be a good, profitable, fair business. A lot of people in the cannabis industry, they want 100+% margins. They want ridiculous profit margins. And in that, they're trying to sell their product for probably 2 or 3 times the true value of that product, in our opinion. So we came in, we said, we want to sell it at a fair profit, a sustainable profit that isn't going to put us into a weird corner or get us into a bad situation later on. We want to be able to make a product that is good, affordable, high quality, and fairly priced for everybody. And we want to give everybody a sustainable life with their family. We don't want people working 60 hours a week or 80 hours a week. Like, everybody in this lab works 40, maybe 50 hours a week at most. And we all go home. We work 4/10s, so we have 3-day weekends with our family, and that quality of life is hard to beat. You can't really do that in most cannabis industries. Most labs are running their people thin, they're tired, they're exhausted, they're making mistakes, they're having errors, and they're not happy with their life. They want to be home. Where us, everybody here, we're excited to come to work every day. We're like, we want to come in, we want to make product, we want to make good product, we want to provide a good medicine to our friends, our family, and everybody in Oregon, where that sets us apart from other people that are just trying to survive. They're trying to pay their bills because they've been in this processing business for so long that they are still trying to sell their product at the same price that they started at, or a little bit less, and they have already kind of gone downhill and they're starting to lose money.
I think you're also selling yourself a little short, because I think that part of the reason why you can have employees who are happy, who are working normal hours, whereas other cannabis businesses don't have that, where people are working 80 hours a week, etc., just trying to hit whatever profit target they're looking for, is because you came in with the right plan, you position yourself in the market properly, you have equipment that lowers your operating costs, you've done a lot of work on lowering operating costs all around. But that, when you look at lowering operator costs, it's not about just cutting employee wages, trying to get the most out of your people. You've looked at the processes and the equipment instead.
We knew coming in what our cost was to process. We weren't trying to catch a falling knife and trying to survive, where we knew that we can process it for X amount of dollars and sell it for X amount of dollars and still allow all of our employees to have a good wage and to allow a good life to work balance.
So since you've been through a couple cannabis or a few different cannabis ventures, this being the most recent, and Emerald Valley Processors is very successful right now, what advice would you give to a new cannabis company who's coming into the extract market?
I think the best thing you can possibly do when you're starting this business or this venture is talk to someone that's done it before, get a consultation, make sure you're not just trying to go at it in the dark and taking guesses and assuming things. Talk to someone that's done this exact same thing before, get their advice, maybe pay them a little bit of money to tell you, this is what I've learned, these are all the mistakes I've lost money on, and that consultation fee will pay for that in no time at all. It'll be the best cost savings you can do. Talking to Luna, they're very knowledgeable. They know what you need to do to get this system running. They know the ins and outs of setting it up. They know the ins and outs of the hoops you might have to jump through with your local fire marshal or your engineers, and just making sure that you have a plan long before you plan on running. You have a facility planned out. You have someone helping you guide that facility in the right direction. You're not spending money on equipment you don't need. You are making good choices. You don't need the top tier of everything to post-process. You can get away with the mid-tier stuff, and it's still going to do the exact same thing. You can even spend the money you saved on automation, on labor, and you can buy those really nice vacuum ovens or analytics equipment. You can have an HPLC or a GC, and you can get answers on the fly at your lab the same day versus a week-long wait from sending your extract to get tested from another place. And then if you have in-house analytics, you can get answers the same day. You can change your process, and you can quickly pivot in a direction that will give you a better process or a better product in less time.
Awesome, yeah. Earlier I talked about how you guys do an awesome job of merging cannabis knowledge and scientific knowledge, and I think we can hopefully go over and see some of that.
Absolutely, yeah.
Maybe we should start by starting to run the Oberon first?
Sure, yeah, you want to do that?
Cool, yeah, let's do it.
So I will go ahead and go here. I'll grab my step stool. Just like that, it's all loaded up, and then you would just go outside to the HMI and you'd press start.
Okay, now we moved on to the post-processing room and the analytics room at Emerald Valley Processors. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a really awesome space where at Emerald Valley you can really see where the scientific and the cannabis backgrounds merge. Mm-hmm. You really get a sense for just how you take a scientific approach to everything extraction, which we at Luna really like.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you could give us an idea of what you do here and just how it helps your business.
So this is the room where pretty much after the pans have been poured out of the Luna, they are then, THCA has been precipitated out of the solution, and you're towards the end of the process of your bulk extract. It then comes into here where we reformulate it, we test it, we mix different batches together. Say we run 10 runs of the same strain, we then will combine those 10 runs together. Or say we did 10 of those runs, but 2 of those runs didn't really meet our mark of quality, or they didn't test out right, or there's something weird about it, or maybe it's darker. We won't run that one. We won't combine that one with the group of the other pans. We will be very selective on what pans we choose to combine together. Our most important thing here is we're not letting anything come out of this building that we wouldn't ourselves try and consume and use. If it doesn't meet the mark, we are going to further post-process it, either separate the THCA out from the HT or the minors and the minor cannabinoids, the terpenes, the flavonoids. You're going to separate your THCA from that, reprocess that HT, maybe distill it, maybe make water clear terpenes out of it, or then take that THCA and then recombine that into a different batch, or grow diamonds out of those, redissolve them, grow diamonds, and then take that HTE that has been further processed and then mix that in back with the sugar sauce that you've then turned into diamonds and reformulate another product. So we don't waste out any product here. It is all recoverable. It is all reusable. It is all reformulatable. And you can take a dirty, dark extract and you can take further steps and you can turn it into a very high quality product if you remove those other impurities you don't want, that maybe weren't caught in the CRC that you have to reformulate, or maybe you'll rerun through CRC again. You can take a pan that you've already ran and you can redissolve it, run it through the Luna, run it through CRC again, get it to a lighter color. We usually don't do that because our Luna is pretty much always running biomass through it, but that is an option. A lot of people do a lot of reformulation, CRCing through their Luna, where they will buy crude or dark extracts from other companies. They will rerun it through their Luna. They will make a lighter colored extract and be done and sell that. We don't necessarily do that here very much, but it is a very good option to be able to have in your back pocket if you need to do that.
But that also goes back into vertical integration and just being able to source your own product.
Absolutely.
And thinking about sourcing
Yes.
as a key part of your business.
Yeah, we aren't buying other people's extract because we really control the input material we have coming in, where when we get a bunch of product, we know we're going to be able to make good extracts out of it. We have already done a benchtop test extraction on it to see and confirm that it's good. And if it isn't good, we will say no to that biomass. We will pass on it. We're not locked in to have to buy anything we don't feel like we can produce a good product from. And I think that really helps us not get into a situation where we bought a bunch of material, we can't sell the product because it's not really meeting the mark. And we just make sure whatever we're bringing in is going to produce a good product. And if for some reason, say something happens in the run, it got too warm or something happened that is uncontrollable, you lost power, say, and your chiller shut off, that run gets ruined or gets really dark, you can rerun it through the Luna. You can make that same product you know is good, and you can get it good again and run it through the system and come out with a nice colored extract.
Can you talk a little bit about how, you've touched on it, but how having in-house analytics allows you to both do that, just make a high quality product, but also how it lets you make a high quality product at scale? Yeah,
absolutely. So I'll kind of run you through our intake process. We get a sample of product. Ideally, we go to that farm. We take the sample ourselves, so we know that it is a representative sample of the entire batch, where you're not having the farmer say, I'm going to cherry pick all these good stuff off the top. Here's the sample. And you're like, oh, this is great. And then the rest of the batch is not that great. We want to be part of that process where we are fair. We're going to take a representative sample. Say there's 10 bags of biomass. We're going to take a little sample out of each one. We actually have a biomass probe sample we actually take, and it is a probe that has these little cavities that you turn, you lock it, and you get 3 different layers of the biomass samples. And we'll do that from various different bags. We'll take all those bags, combine all the samples together, then we will test that sample. That gives you a representative sample of the entire batch versus just what they cherry picked out of the bag. Then we will get a potency on that. We can even run it on our GC, and we can get a volatile headspace result from that and see how many terpenes are in there, if it even has very high terpenes. Usually you can tell by looking, feeling, smelling what it's going to produce on the flavor side. The THCA side, that you can't really tell unless you have analytics. So we will test that biomass. We will figure out how much THCA is in there. We'll make sure there's not too much delta-9 THC that won't crystallize or prevent crystallization from happening. And a lot of the times when people dry, if their rooms are too hot, you'll get THCA to decarboxylate at the flower level into delta-9 THC. And then you go to run and you can't crash out the THCA because there's not enough of it to crash out. So that is one very key aspect of in-house analytics. Before we even run that sample test, benchtop test, we will already know how much THCA is in that representative sample of the whole batch. So then when we extract it, we can say, we got this X amount out of that product. And then we test the extract as well, and that will tell us this is at 80% THCA and it's at 2% THC. That's going to be a great product to run. We were going to be happy with buying that. And we'll also then test the waste biomass and say, this is how much we left behind doing our normal process. Is that going to be right? Should we increase our soak? Should we change the run parameters a little bit to try to get more out of it. Most of the time we have it set with the Luna now where we can run 90% of the material the same way every time, and we're going to get a sufficient extraction, and we're going to do it in a sufficient amount of time that gives us the ability to stay profitable and get enough product out of that machine for every hour it's running.
But having that in-house analytics, if something does change, if you have some biomass that's just way different than anything you've run, you get a really quick turnaround time.
We do, yeah.
So you know exactly what you got out, and then you can go back and make changes if you need to.
Where we say 90% of the labs don't have in-house analytics, they're going to take their biomass sample, they're going to take that biomass, they're going to maybe do a benchtop extraction. They might not even do that. A lot of the times they will just take the test result they have on that flower, and that could be representative of just those buds. It might not be representative of the whole sample. Again, that's why we go take the sample ourselves if possible. But so say we take that representative sample, we test it, and it doesn't meet the mark. We will have that answer the day the person brought that sample into us, or the day we went and got the sample. We will have the answer the same day, where another lab is going to send that out. They're going to take 3 to 5 days, or they're going to pay a rush charge, which is usually double the cost of testing, to get like a 1 or 2 day turnaround. We'll have that answer by the end, before the end of the day. We will know this material is sufficient to buy. And at that point, we can say, we will buy your material. Where, say another person trying to buy their material, they're going to do tests and they're going to have a 4-day answer. We've already decided we want that material. It meets the mark and it is everything we need. We've already given that client a yes, we'll take it. And they're going to choose us to have us buy the product over someone that's still waiting for test results that may not even buy it. That's a big part of it. Also, when we're processing, we have answers within 30 to 45 minutes of what happened on this first extraction. Say we have 200 pounds, we just ran 20 pounds of it. How did it work? Where is our results at for the spent biomass? Should we adjust our run? Should we be good? We'll know that the same day, and we're very flexible and quick at responding to that. Where most people, if they had a Luna, they didn't have in-house analytics, they're already going to run that whole batch of product before they get results on the first batch that they ran.
Yeah, and just at like running at a smaller scale, if your production is at a lower rate, I'd say it's less important because you have the time where you might be able to send a sample out and get a result back in a week, and that doesn't really affect your production cycle. Yeah. Whereas if you're trying to maximize the value of your equipment and get the most out of it, you have to have things happen fast.
Yep. Yeah, I would say in the year that we've had the Luna running, we have probably only not ran 1 or 2 full days.
Yeah, so earlier you mentioned that the transition from operating a CBD business to operating a THC business, it was actually surprisingly stress-free or challenge-free. But what are some of those challenges you've run into in actually running the THC side?
Challenges, I would say, is making sure you're getting good quality product, making sure, I think with the THC side, there's a lot of people that were from the traditional market that aren't as business oriented. So trying to figure out who to work with, what farmers to work with, making sure that they are also professional, that they're also business oriented, and not just trying to do things however they want and try to like cut corners and do things that aren't compliant. We've had to essentially not keep certain clients that we were working with because they just weren't professional. They weren't following through with their promises. They weren't showing up on time, or they were just showing up with product with no indication that they were coming. And we are constantly running. We are processing. And if someone just shows up with 500 pounds, they're like, hey, you want to buy this? We're like, we didn't even know you were coming. Like, how is that professional? And that's not going to be an everlasting relationship. A relationship that isn't feeling right probably isn't going to stay feeling right. You should probably cut the ties there, move on, find a good relationship from someone you can rely on and trust, and continue to build those relationships with people. We have a lot of different people we process for that started small, and now they're scaling up and they're growing with us, and they're allowing us to take over processing where they have a processing license, but they're no longer processing that much, or we are taking over a lot of their processing because we can do it more efficiently. We have a larger system. We can extract faster. And us processing for them actually costs them less money in the end to buy it from us, even though they could run it themselves. They have found that it's more affordable for us to do it. We can produce a better product in a faster amount of time.
Want to show us some of the products that you have
Yeah,
here?
sure. So these are just some of our smaller runs. A bunch of this is just kind of like a sugar sauce or a batter. This one's a little bit more of a wet batter where it's kind of sloppy and doesn't hold its form as well. This is definitely more of like a sugar batter where you're going to have a lot of form filled in there. This is very saucy. You can see you can move it around, and those are all terpenes, flavonoids, and things that give your extract taste. Where this is more of like almost a dry, not crumble because it's still kind of wet, but it's like a sugar sauce again. That could probably be classified as a sugar sauce or a batter. Mm-hmm. You also have the option of going to diamonds, which is going to be big THCA crystals that have just grown. You've controlled the evaporation. You've allowed the THCA to grow into big crystals instead of a bunch of small crystals. When you're going through when your goal is high volume, high throughput, the best and quickest way to do that is going to be a sugar sauce where you can crash out that THCA really quickly. You can kind of force the crystallization to happen, where if you want to go to diamonds, which is sometimes a more desirable product, a higher priced product, you really have to spend a lot of time controlling that evaporation, controlling the process, making sure you're not just letting it turn to a sugar and crashing out really quickly, and you get big diamonds out of it. And if you can take this, you can dump it out and...
So the top is THCA diamonds,
Yep.
and what's flowing out the bottom is a really high terpene sauce.
Correct, yeah. So you can just kind of let it sit there. It'll drain on its own. And your sauce will slowly drain just by gravity. A lot of the times we're a higher throughput lab, so we're not going to be doing this necessarily. We're going to use centrifugal force, and we're going to use centrifuges, and you're going to be left with a very dry diamond like that is much drier.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, again, we're at Emerald Valley Processors, and Josh, thanks so much for showing us around and talking to us about the Oberon and how you scaled your business. And we will see you next time.
Hey everyone. I guess everyone knows who I am. Jack Nato, president at Luna Technologies. We got some good questions coming through the chat. I think Josh was able to get to a few of them. I was able to get to a couple of them, and we're just going to keep it going. So we got some private questions that didn't pop up, and then if you have any questions as we're going, just keep typing them in the chat, and I'll pick them up. And we got about 15 minutes to go through them. So let's get started. Josh, do you have a solventless solution to compete in this emerging product category?
We haven't yet. We've talked about doing solventless. It's a little hard to justify the low yields you get from running solventless versus a solvent extraction. We definitely have a need in our market for more people doing it, so we've talked about it, but it's really hard to justify with our current team and our current setup right now to have them do solventless extraction and try to push that side of it when the profit margins aren't as good, and it's just a much harder biomass control you have to have going in to make a good quality solventless. You can't really filter CRC when you're doing solventless, so you're limited to really high priced biomass and low yields, and you do get a little bit better price at the end, but if you run the numbers, it's not as good as running solvent. So we've stuck with just sticking with our butane and propane runs, and have talked about doing smaller scale solventless, but not at this point.
What do you think would push you over the edge to make that decision?
Probably a good, consistent farm that's feeding us good. Probably like a partnership with a farm that is growing genetics for solventless. It's really specific what you grow for solventless versus running a traditional solvent extraction. You don't really need to worry about the shape of the trichome. Where it's solventless, you really need to know when you're harvesting, how you're harvesting, and those specific strains that work good for solventless to get decent yields. So that would probably be what pushes us over the edge. And then we would want some sort of automated solution for that as well to cut down on the labor cost.
Yeah, that's hard to come by for solventless.
Yeah.
Okay, another question just popped up. How do you project market consumption?
Mainly, we go by what stores are buying from us, what they're telling us they need, and we didn't just start going full bore, full speed ahead and hope for the best. We slowly had relationships with farms or dispensaries and asked them how much they thought they would need, how much we kind of guessed they needed. We also have a store, so we have a lot of good insight from that of what they've been needing, where the price points were at. So just discussions with stores was probably the biggest way to project that. There's not necessarily the greatest options where other markets you can kind of look at the trends and follow that pretty easily, but cannabis is a little tighter and harder to know exactly what the market calls for. But just open conversation with dispensaries and wholesalers are pretty important for that.
Do you use any like market analytics research companies' data?
No, we did have, I think it was BCS analytics for a little while, but it really didn't seem like it was all that accurate. I would love to know if there was a better option out there, something other people are using, but I couldn't really find or suggest a really good solution currently.
Yeah, I don't think I've heard. I don't think I've heard of many people being extremely happy with their just the state of cannabis market analytics.
Yeah.
Okay, any tips for running 100% propane as a solvent?
Yeah, your pores are going to be pretty foamy. The temperature differential from your atmosphere to your solvent definitely react differently with propane versus like a butane pore. You would want to probably remove more solvent as soon as you pour that. If you have too much solvent in there, that solvent's evaporating really quick. It can cause fast crash issues to where your pores will sugar out, which can actually be a good thing if you're trying to actually crash out your solution quickly. But I would say propane's going to run really quick, but at the same time, I think you'll get a little bit better extraction from running with a butane mix in there as well. And that's from experience. I'd say it's better to have a mix. Propane is great for terpenes. You're going to keep more terpenes in there, but I don't think you get as many cannabinoids with just a straight propane run.
Yeah, hard to get a good yield.
Yeah.
Have you run into any issues maintaining quality and consistency while you've been scaling? And then how did you tackle those?
Yeah, you definitely run into different challenges when you're going through higher volume. You want to go as fast as you can, so you have to find out where you can kind of slow down and not cost your run time or cost just the quality to drop. Being really, really careful about how much you're loading in your machine. You don't want to just push as much as you can into the machine. You can stuff the machine full of material, but if it's a really high potency 28% A buds or something, you might not get a full extraction if you're filling that machine to the brim and trying to stuff as much as you can in that. So we have a good plan of higher potency. We usually, and we're not filling half volume, but say we would put 80% of how much material we'd put in there versus like a trim that was like 16% or 18% trim. We're checking on how much we're filling in the machine and trying to control, not necessarily doing all the runs at the same size, but higher potency, a little bit smaller material size per run, maybe a little bit longer soak to get more of it out, and not just running the same process over and over. And I think the biggest thing is just checking your work. If you're feeling like, hey, I didn't get as much out of this as I should, you should test your spent biomass to confirm that and take your notes and follow up on that in the future to see how you can adjust your run parameters. So with scaling, we've added more testing, not necessarily more testing as in we're testing more things. We're just checking our work more often and ensuring that our decisions and our feelings are right with how we're running our system. Being on top of that is important. Otherwise, you can scale up and you can keep running, but you might be leaving a lot of cannabinoids behind if you're not checking your work and ensuring you're getting a full extraction.
Sure. Yeah. Did you run into any issues outside of the actual extraction process?
Yeah, I mean, post-processing, you So we went from an IO to an Oberon, which means we pretty much doubled our throughput overnight, which means everything. Our pours were twice as big, our runs were twice as big, our pan requirements were then twice as big. Our miners, for diamond mining, then needed to be bigger. Our jars, if we were going to jars, needed to be bigger. Our vacuum oven space started filling up a lot quicker. So making sure that you have that kind of planned. We've switched to not your traditional 9x13 Pyrex pan. They actually make a deeper version of that. So we've switched all of our pans to that, which fits a little more in there. We can fit a whole run into it, where with the IO, we could fit 2 runs into that pan. Now we're fitting 1 run from the Oberon into that pan, where if we didn't do that, cutting down the amount of containers you use per your pour is really important. You don't want transfer loss. You don't want 1 pour into 3 pans if you don't have to have it in 3 pans, because there's 3 pans of transfer loss. So trying to make sure you're planning for the scale and what volume is going to increase, and making sure everything after extraction is also scaled up to handle that.
Awesome. Yeah. Okay. I think you covered the second part of this question already in the video, but first part is, how many employees do you have, and what has been the turnover rate? And then you did talk about how you keep good employees from leaving already, but if you want to just touch on that again too.
Yep. So right now in the lab, it is me and 4 other people. One of them is part-time, and we haven't had any turnover. I really, really push hard to have a really solid team of people that I trust and care for. And I think the biggest way to retain employees is to care about your employees, to care about their life, to actually make a connection with those people, because they are going to be who you spend most of your time with. And you want to be able to rely on them, and they want to be able to rely on you. So we and just recently we were doing everything with myself and 3 other people. We just recently added another person, and that was due to scaling and needing more people. But making sure that you have a well-trained team is really important. You're having SOPs written and everybody's following them and working together, and having an open dialogue with everybody is really important, as well as being one person. You're not going to know what is happening in every part of the lab. If you have communication with everybody, you can learn the challenges they're having, and you can address those challenges immediately and try to make their jobs easier. Where I spend most of my time trying to make everything they do as easy as possible, where add automation for our cart filler, or add a large system to decarb our extracts to make carts to prep for the cart filler, get bigger mixing vessels to do homogenizing, and just pretty much anything I can do to make their workload less. They feel like they're not going to be as overworked, and they can care more about the job they're doing and not feeling stressed or overwhelmed by the workload you're giving them, because we're giving them a pretty big workload. So
yeah, it's a good way to treat people.
Yeah.
Okay, what do you do with extract that's high in Delta 9 and doesn't crash out?
So if we're going to do that, we are pretty flexible. We have a really big cart line. So if we had a run that was not going to crash out, we are also, again, a pretty high throughput lab. So we make decisions pretty quickly. Say we have a strain that just doesn't want to crash out, or it just crashed out a little bit. If it's a partial crash out, we might put that pan into our centrifuge, spin out the THCA that's left in there, get all the Delta 9 and the miners and the HT out of there, and then keep the THCA aside. However, we'll probably more than likely just take that whole batch, put it in our decarb process, and put it to carts. So we're going to have to decarb all the THCA into Delta 9 anyways for our cartridges. So we would just probably put that to carts and not waste the time trying to post-process it, get all the THCA back out of it. Sometimes, if you have a pan that is just not crashing out very well, you can take some THCA that you've spun out, you can kind of sprinkle that into your pan and essentially seed your pan with THCA to help it crystallize. However, that doesn't always work. If it's a pretty high D9 extract, you got to have usually more than 40 or 50% THCA for it to crash out to begin with. So if it's that low, we probably wouldn't have ran it in the first place, because we would have tested it and saw that it had a really high D9 number, and we would have passed on the biomass. or we would have had to plan on it going to carts from the beginning in the first place. So knowing issues ahead of time with testing prior to running is the biggest thing. If you should know if your pan's going to crash out. I can make anything crash out if it has enough THCA into it. And if it's not crashing out, we probably didn't do analytics on it beforehand, or we missed it and somehow that's our fault. Or something happened in the process where it decarbed on its own, but we're pretty well controlled here, so that's usually not happening.
And do you typically pick up on that when you do testing of the biomass before you purchase the biomass?
So we'll test the biomass, and usually there's maybe 1%, maybe 2% of D9 in there. That's going to be fine. But we've had we're vertically integrated. There was a time last season where the drying room at our grow, the HVAC system went out, so the whole grow room got really warm. All of the THCA at the flower level, not all of it, it was like 60% of it decarbed, and it was like 120 degrees in the drying room for a period of days over the weekend, I think. So that caused us to have to send all of that to carts. We weren't going to be able to crash it out. And it wasn't, because of the drying process, the flower also wasn't the best looking flower. So as a vertically integrated company, we transitioned and made it into a sellable product by turning it into cartridges. Still a great cartridge. It just lost some of the THCA at the beginning, and that kind of helps if you're going to decarb it anyways. So having different options for SKUs that you can put it into is really important.
Yeah, it gives you that flexibility.
Yeah.
Got a couple more questions that came in during the video, and then a couple more in the chat. So I think we can get through them pretty quickly. Here's two quick ones. How do you store biomass, and how do you store packaged products or finished goods to ride out slow periods in the market? So
we have a couple big freezers. We have a 20-foot freezer truck, and then we have a 40-foot freezer container, and then we also have a giant it's like 60 by 20 refrigerated / freezer vault. So all of our finished products, packaged or bulk, goes into our big refrigerated vault. Biomass is, if it's fresh frozen, it's put into one of our freezer trucks or containers. And when we have fresh frozen, our priority is to run through that as quick as possible to get it out of the freezer, get the freezer turned back off. And with the Oberon, that's pretty quick. We can take 1,000 pounds and get it out of that freezer in 2 or 3 days, and pretty easily. So our goal is always try to get the fresh frozen done as quick as possible, get our freezers turned back off. But there's times where we keep getting fresh frozen and we keep our freezers running, but it's, as long as we're running the material, it's fine to keep it running, and it pays for itself to have it on. And that fresh frozen makes a little more money off than the cured stuff anyways. Our cured product we keep in our vault, either on the processing side or the wholesale side. And we keep it refrigerated or in a cooled vault, not a freezer vault. We don't want to keep the cured stuff in a dedicated freezer. It's not really worth it. So just as long as it's stored somewhere cool and in the dark, ideally.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, 2 more quick ones, or one real quick one. What type of HPLC do you have, and are you happy with it?
We have an Agilent 1100. We're really happy with it. The Agilent 1220 is a little bit better and newer, but they're also 40 to 60 grand. We paid, I think, 12 grand for ours, refurbished from Agilent, and we've never had an issue with it. A little bit of a learning curve versus the GC, but we love it. We use it every day, and it's one of our most valuable tools, I would say. We can get answers way quicker than anybody else that's using a third-party lab, and it requires some learning curves and good process development and method development and sample prep work, but we got a great team that loves running it. So as long as you take care of it, just like any other machine, you take care of it and you do maintenance on it. I think we've had it down for a couple of days max since we've had it, and we've had it for 5 years. So we love it.
Awesome. Yeah, it's good equipment.
Yeah.
Okay, this question, actually, I can answer part of it. If you have active recovery, how do you deal with power outages? The extraction system, the Operon and the IO from Luna, does a passive recovery, but we use chillers for that recovery, so they're still affected by any power fluctuations or outages.
Yep.
typically jurisdictions require you to put that on backup generator. Not all do, but many do.
We weren't
And I'm not sure
required
what
to
you
have
guys
it.
are
We
doing.
do have a backup generator to answer that question. We were not required to have that backup generator for the process. We were required to have it for our ventilation and safety equipment. With that being said, we have lost power one time, and we were in the middle of a run. We had enough chilling capacity in that chiller. There was enough solvent in there that it was cold enough. It didn't recover as fast as it would normally, but it was still cold enough to passively recover the solvent that was in the distillation column during that, even without the added heat from our heater. So we were towards the end of the run, so it kind of worked out to our benefit. But at the same time, you can stop your run where you're at and you can leave it sit there overnight. If you were in the middle of a drain, the solvent in your biomass column would probably not be the best, and it would be dark and you'd pull a bunch of impurities out. But on your pour side or in the collection side, you could recover that passively, most likely get it all recovered, and then pour that out and then recover when you get back power again. So we've been in that situation once, but it was pretty good in our benefit. It was like the final pour. There wasn't solvent in the reactor. There was just a little bit of solvent left in the distillation column, and we got it recovered and poured out. So
Yeah, great. Okay, I think that pretty much covers it on questions. Thanks everyone for joining, and thanks Josh for helping to host. And we will see you all next time.
Sounds great. Have a good day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Take care.